Pete Price, thank you so much for coming.
Very flattered to be asked, because this is a brand new podcast, isn't it? And it's exciting, and I love the subject matter you're going for, because I think it's an untold story. In fact, everyone you're doing is an untold story.
Well, I'll start with probably the most important question that you can ask a man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. I've never been stupid. I've always gone to doctors if I'm not well and sorted myself out. I'm not a hypochondriac, but I go. And I found 50 years on radio, of late night radio, I found so many men would not go to the doctors, would not go and sort themselves out. And one of the most wonderful things I did was with prostate cancer. There was it always stayed with me, this. There was a thing at Tranmere Rovers Football Club, and they were doing the red, amber and green, the traffic light system to find out about prostate cancer. And I was saying to people, you've got to go. Pal of mine, Paul, who used to run the Floral Pavilion, said, nah, it's raining, I'm not going. And then he went, I'll go. Yeah, Pricey said, I'll go. Saved his life. They got him just in time. And that's the most important thing. You've got to look after yourself. And I'm a 78-year-old man now, so I want to live as long as I can. So I want to help myself. I mean, it takes me half an hour in the morning to take me tablets and 20 minutes at night to take me tablets.
It's funny.
So in answer to your question, I'm well, thank you.
It's funny, isn't it? They say that youth is wasted on the young. And I think there is some truth in that, because when we're younger and we're quite carefree, aren't we? And we don't tend to think too deeply about our health, especially not our mental health. And one of the things that I found from doing these conversations and having these quite intimate chats with men on this podcast is that a lot of the men I've spoken to have gone full circle, and they've gone from not really taking care of themselves and not speaking to being in a place where they absolutely are in control of their own bodies and their own minds, and they take great pride in going to see the doctor and having those conversations and going to therapy. And that's something that you've always been a big advocate of, isn't it?
I did, and I always have done. And really, I used to say, once again on my late night radio show, I used to say, I'm a priest. I'm in the confession box, and you can talk to me because it's just a phone, so we don't have to look at each other, so you don't have to be embarrassed. And I think over the 50 years, I've saved a few people's lives because of it.
Yeah, you certainly have. It's an incredible career. I mean, by anyone's standards, I mean, you've done so much. You've done stand-up comedy. As you said, you've had one of the most popular late-night radio phone-in shows, I think, in the country, certainly that I can think of. You've compared. You've been part of so many wonderful things. You've raised a lot of money. You've done a lot of charity work. And people listening to this that aren't from Merseyside might not even be aware of you. But in Liverpool, you are synonymous with the city. You're one of the faces that people think of when they walk around the streets of Liverpool. You are, ingrained into the culture of Liverpool, and I think that's a fascinating thing. What does that look like on a kind of day-to-day basis for you?
It's fabulous, because you're only a young man. I was here with the dark times, the times before 2008, when we got Capital Culture. To me, that was the greatest
Changed
day
everything.
of my life. I broke my heart. I'm not a born Scouser. I'm an adopted Scouser, and I've been given the freedom of the city, which has been an incredibly flattering thing. But I love this city with a passion. When we lost the boats, because I was in the Merchant Navy years and years ago before I went in show business, so I went in the catering, and I worked on the QE, not the QE2, the Canadian Pacific boats. I was on the Empress of Canada, the Empress of England. And so I was here when this part where we are now was alive with ships and people, and then we lost it all because of changes. And now we're getting it back. And Southampton took us to the Court of Human Rights to try and stop us. but we're now getting cruise ships back, and each cruise ship's worth about £1 million to Liverpool for the economy. So I love this city. And what I love about the city is you can never be alone. You can come to Liverpool and there's no way you can sit in a bar by yourself, because people will just come up and say, do you want a drink, or where you from? Because they're nosy so-and-so's up here.
It's a fascinating city, isn't it? I've completely fallen in love with it. I've been here nearly 17 years now. And similar to you, I feel completely at home. I mean, I don't feel like a Scouser, but I certainly feel like I've adopted some of those things that are kind of quintessentially Scouse, the sense of humour and the pride in the city and the pride in each other, and there's a sense of community, I think, in Liverpool that exists that doesn't exist in many other places.
I'll say one thing that sums it up. When we do something, we do it right. When we did the Eurovision Song Competition, we put on a show that has never been topped in the history of the Eurovision. So we do it right. And people come and cannot believe the friendliness. They can't believe the magic in the city. And we've got one of the greatest waterfronts in the world. I mean, I live across the water, and people say, but if you love Liverpool so much, why do you live over there? I have a place, and my view from my lounge
you get
is
to see
the
it.
whole of the waterfront.
You get to see it.
I never take it for granted. And then working in the tower for so many years, I used to see the other side. So, I just love it. I could never leave where I live.
It's funny, isn't it, when you said then about that people can't believe when they come here how incredible it is and how vibrant it is, and there's such a mixture of cultures and really really diverse backgrounds, people from all kinds of walks of life. It's a real melting pot. Do you think that maybe part of the reason why people are so shocked and so pleasantly surprised when they come to Liverpool is that it is still vilified outside of Merseyside, certainly in the press? There is still, I think, quite a negative stereotype that exists about Liverpool, which I think is so unjust.
It's taken many, many years. As I say, there's a huge difference in our ages. And as a working comic, we had all the gags still, your hubcap still on your car. We had all that. Plus, we had a bad time. We had a bad time in the Margaret Thatcher days. Without going into politics, we had a bad time. We had Derek Hatton here. We had very strong Labour. We had very strong Conservative. And there was all that. And it takes a lot to lose an image. But by goodness, we're doing it. I mean, the world, everybody wants to come to Liverpool. And what is wonderful about the cruise ships, it's 5 minutes walk into the centre of it.
The centre of the universe.
It's unbelievable. I'm getting upset because it upsets me.
Oh, mate.
Because it's so good. Go to Southampton. Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Anyone listening to this in Southampton just immediately.
Oh, you're lovely
switched
people,
off.
but what? Sorry. By the way, I've worked there as a comic a few times. I've died on my arse a few times in Southampton.
Oh, bless you. What was that like coming up as a young stand-up comic? That must have been incredible. I mean, what a side of life you must have seen back then.
I've got a million stories because I was on the road, and in those days you could work 3 clubs in one night.
Jesus.
Because in the Northeast, for instance, there would be 3 social clubs in one street, and they would go straight from work to the club. So they'd seen every act, they'd seen every singer, they'd heard every gag. And I always remember going on stage and going, I don't have to die here, I can stay at home, there's loads of clubs around there. But you learnt your trade. I went on, this is one of my favourite stories now, it was horrendous at the time. I was working Stanley British Legion is etched in my mind for the rest of my life. I walked on stage. I was outrageous in those days. I mean, as in the way I dressed. I was in hot pants and knickerbockers in leather, and I was but I didn't think I was gay. Just happy. Anyway, I walked on stage and they went, get him off his crap. I hadn't opened my mouth. Seriously, hadn't opened my mouth. So they closed the curtains on me, and I seriously hadn't done one gag. So me being me, I went out and got the mic in there, and they started booing me. Get off your crap. But I hadn't done anything. So I said to the concert secretary, what's going on? They don't like you. Go. So I went off stage. I was crying my eyes out. went off stage, and all my clothes were out in the street. They went in the dressing room. I honestly hadn't done a thing. Said, I'm going to the police. So I went to the police station. I went to the police and I went, I've just been thrown out of Stanley British Legion and all my clothes. And the policeman went, well, you must be shite.
So it was a really supportive atmosphere that you were part of.
Because you earned big money to them. They worked all week, and then the comic might get, I don't know, 75 quid or 100 quid or 150 quid in those days. But you learnt your lessons. You actually learnt your trade as a comic, and you as an actor, and we've talked about this as mates. All you've done is made you who you are, and each little bit. And with Hollyoaks, all the storylines. Look what you're doing now. You're doing a podcast because of Hollyoaks, because you saw so much pain in young men and all the problems they've got, and how stupid men can be by not looking after themselves. So it's all those. I mean, I've got so many stories. We went Motherwell Miners Club. I thought, show business is show business. So if I have a photograph taken next to a white Rolls Royce in a fur coat, that looked great, which it is if you're doing the Palladium. Not when you're doing Motherwell Miners Club, where they're all out of work. And I got booed as I walked in. By the way, I do well as a comic. I'm only telling you some of the bad ones. I booed as I went in. And you get your music, so your dots, that's what they call it. So your music for the band. And it was a piano accordionist who's never seen music in his life. So how I'm supposed to sing in between the gags? And they locked me in my dressing room for my own safety, and we climbed out the window and had a week's holiday in Scotland. So it's that. But from all those things, you learn your craft.
It's, I mean, you work and career aside, and I will bring this full circle actually back to your radio show. But in your private life, growing up was really, I mean, by anyone's standards, you had a very, very difficult experience, didn't you? I mean, your father was not a particularly pleasant man, quite a violent,
Wife Peter,
quite a violent,
Yep.
abusive man. Your struggles with your own sexuality. I mean, you've spoken very openly about those before, which I think is incredible. To one of the things that I think is wonderful about, and I'm going to use that phrase that I hate, when we go on our healing journey, and when we
I've never heard it before. I think it's rather nice.
Thank you very much.
Like
when we take ownership of ourselves, we take ownership of those issues that we went through, and we look for the positives, and we try and create good out of them, it seems to me. And I think your radio show, yes, there was a lot of fun, and there's lots of clips of people ringing in and taking the piss and all that sort of stuff. But at its core, it was a show for people to ring in with problems, and to have someone on the end of the phone to listen. And I wonder if your radio show was so successful because you'd had such a difficult childhood.
Yeah, I was adopted. I was gay when it was illegal. My father was an abusive man, and my mother brought me up on her own. So all those things, and dying on my backside as a comic. So all those things, doing panto.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just, for those people that are listening and don't know about me, and if you check me out on social media, you'll be surprised and on Safari. But one story, the two stories I'll say. One that changed my life forever was the James Bulger story. Denise and Ralph were demented. We were worried sick. We didn't know what had happened to the child. Then Ralph's mother, Helen Bulger, rang my radio show and said, I'm never going to see that angel again. Without going into the whole story, because it would take hours, I became the voice of Liverpool. The whole world descended on Liverpool. I then became friendly with Denise, and I went on the march to keep Venables and Thompson in prison. That was the power of my show. And we extended the 4-hour show 5 nights a week to 5 hours because people were grieving. I had a breakdown at the end of that because nobody was counselling me. And people had seen James being taken by 2 boys and thought, is this little brother being naughty, and the lads are taking him home? And I had to live with all that, and these stories came out. That was one. That changed my life. And the big story that went round the world was a 12-year-old boy who'd rung before. He was a funny little lad. He sounded like a 10-year-old, not 12. And he was always complaining he'd had a very sad life, etc., etc. I then spoke to him, and this particular night he said he was going to commit suicide. I then had to make a decision. It doesn't matter about producers. It's my show. I have to make the decision. What do I do? So in between talking to him and having a little break and keeping him on the line, I rang the police. Long story short, I said, if I come out and save your life and come and get you, would you see me? And he said, you wouldn't do that. I said, yes, I would. I'll walk out of this show. And because I'm an older man, I was worried about paedophilia and all those problems, and by being set up. But I could not have put the phone down, because if he'd have died, I'd have never lived with myself. Also, I'd have lost my show. I went to find him. Michael, his name was. I went to find him. He was about to hang himself from a tree, not too far from Everton Football Club. And I saved his life. He came in the car. I took him to the hospital. The police were in place. The taxi drivers were in place. And I'm really cutting this story down. And he'd been raped by his father in front of his mother, both drug addicts. And he's kept in touch all these years. He's never out of prison. Bless him. His life is completely screwed up. But I always gave him my phone number. Liverpool being Liverpool, there's always an amusing side to it, believe it or not. And we are driving to the hospital, and the police ring me to see if I'm all right. And I say, yeah. Put the phone down. And he went, just for the record, it's illegal to use the phone while you're driving. And I went, I just saved your life, you little bastard. Only Liverpool. Nowhere else. Seriously, am I right, James? Nowhere else could that happen.
There's that sense of humour again.
Even to that. So that's the nature of the show. And then the other side of it is the unbelievable students that ring in the show. And I mean, some of the clips on YouTube are crazy, absolutely crazy. But so many came up to me and said, you got me through my dissertation. So that was the nature of the show. But the other side was the medical side. And we used to have a great guy called Dennis the Chemist, who is now 83 years old and talks about alternative medicines. And he helped so many people. So we had a little girl of 10 ring up, 10 years old, and she was anorexic and she couldn't talk to anyone. And we saved her life.
Wow. Power of radio, man.
Power of radio.
Power of radio. Those things don't seem to exist as much anymore. The radio phone-in shows, they don't seem to be as prevalent anymore. Yours might have been the last kind of great radio phone-in show.
Well, you've got the shows down in LBC and down there. But
I mean the late night ones. I mean
but
LBC is fantastic.
Yeah, but they also have late night ones. But they don't get the callers in. We'd get 90 people trying to get on in an hour. You're lucky if you get 3 calls. That's why they drag them out. I left at the time when I was on a roll. I didn't want. I mean, it's changed because of woke, but that's a complete other podcast. But because of woke, I actually left my radio show because I'd had enough. Because I couldn't open my mouth 4 hours a night, 5 nights a week. Every word that came out of my mouth was a problem.
Wow.
I'll sum it up. I won't mention the television company, but I review the papers for several companies. That's what I do. And I love doing it. I went in, you start about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. A fabulous young lady, about 24 years old, was helping me. So you go through the papers, we pick stories, you go on, you do 3 spots of 15 minutes. And at the end of it, I said to her, thank you so much, young lady. I couldn't have done it without you. To which she said, I'm neither young nor a lady, and do not patronise me, and reported me. She reported me. What have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? I'm thanking somebody. She said, how would you like to be called an old man? I thought she was joking. I promise you, she meant it. And I was incredibly sad. And HR said, Peter, we've got to go through the motion. I was flabbergasted.
You've seen you've seen both sides of it, haven't you? You've had moments of real joy and real success, and you've saved someone's life numerous times, I'm sure, on the radio show. But moments of real sadness and real difficulty. While I've got you on the show, I wondered if you might talk about conversion therapy.
Before you do, if you don't mind, you just said something that I know is dear to your heart, and it's blown me away. It's just jumped into my mind. This one's a hard one, and it's only just come back to me. I had a 22-year-old boy breaking his heart on the phone because he was in an abusive relationship. He was being beaten up by his partner. And I said, you've got to walk away. And the conversation, it was a half-hour conversation. But what upset me was, he said, but I've got to stay with her because I'm not worthy. I'm unattractive. I said, that's what she's done to you. That's what we put up with. That's what we had to deal with. And that's just come back to me as you said that. And I'd love to know whatever happened to him, because that's the problem on my show. Some people you never hear of again. You think,
How do you switch off from it?
I don't.
Do you not?
It's just come back to me all those years later.
Do you carry this? Do you carry this around with you?
I'm a patron of Clare House Children's Hospice. I was there when it first started, and I know the people that started it. And the reason I mention that is the Samaritans, people that work there, get counselling. Nobody gave me counselling for 50 years. I had to take it home with me. And I'm not a mollycoddle type of person, but I think back now, and I could have done with some counselling or somebody to offload on. So it was difficult. But that boy is, and see, now that's going to stay with me the rest of today now.
It's funny, isn't it? I think it's a generational thing as much as anything. Younger generations, and I see it, whenever I work with young people, they're much better equipped to talk about what they're going through and to talk about what's on their mind. But of course, your generation and generations, before you, and even parts of my generation, there is this sort of, especially for men, there is this sort of stoic facade that men wear, where we don't talk about this stuff. And if we've had a hard day and we're upset, we don't, and it eats us up. And that's why so many men end up in really difficult, dark places, I think, because they don't talk about it. Have you've had counselling since you've had therapy? You've talked about this sort of stuff.
I've had a little bit of counselling, but it's very difficult to counsel me because I counsel them, because that's what you do.
Who counsels the counsellor?
Yeah, you turn the well. That was a question I always asked: who counsels a counsellor? And that's a real difficult one. Look, I interrupted you, and you were going to talk about aversion therapy and conversion. Can I ask you a question,
please,
before I tell you about aversion? Because I've never done this publicly. I'd love to know, in a nutshell, what conversion is, and then I'll tell you what aversion, because they out there listening to us will not understand. So if we can give the two definitions. So, because you did it in Hollyoaks.
I did, that's right. So conversion therapy is the inhuman practice of taking somebody, sometimes against their will, but often these are very confused, quite damaged, quite fragile, normally men. They are taken to a group, often hidden behind the guise of religion, to try and basically cure someone of their sexuality, to convert them to a life of, a life that fits in with the Bible's idea of what a normal relationship is.
And is that just talking and indoctrinating?
It's talking, it's praying, it's a lot of the work that these groups do is around men being the best that they can be. These are phrases and buzzwords that they often use, is to be the best version of yourself. So if young men go to these people and say, I'm not the best version of myself because I'm very, very confused, I'm very upset, I'm very fragile, I don't know where I fit in, and I've been having gay thoughts, they will immediately jump on that and say, well, that is the reason why that you
so
are
it's indoctrination.
It's indoctrination, and it's poisonous, and it's violent, and
it's still going on.
And it's still going on. The government won't ban it. It's still not banned in this country. Conversion therapy is still legal. You can still take a vulnerable, confused, sometimes very damaged young man and subject him to the most awful, awful things, all in the name of religion.
So that's conversion therapy. I'll now tell you about aversion therapy. And it's, once again, a very long story, very short. I fought my sexuality at the age of 12. Something wasn't right. I went to the doctors. He laughed in my face. I went to a doctor at 12 and said, I'm getting thoughts. He said, everyone has those thoughts. At the age of 14, I went back to him. He's dead now. I went back to him and I said that I've got these thoughts. And he prescribed me Valium. Thank God I had the knowledge to put them down the toilet, because if I'd have taken those tablets, who would I have been? Anyway, from 14 to 18, I didn't know what to do. I was confused because it was against the law. It was a criminal offence to be gay. And I wanted children, and I wanted to be normal, and I wanted to be everything that everybody is. Because that's how I'd been indoctrinated. One day I came home from work. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. My mum was sitting in bed. She was absolutely distraught. She'd found a letter, stupid letter, something like, Dear Peter, if you marry James, I'll kill myself, David. It was a pathetic letter. Yeah. And she'd not gone rooting. It had fallen out because she wasn't that type of woman. And she, what does this mean? And I said, it means I'm a homosexual. To which she was... You
said that to her?
I had to. I couldn't take it anymore.
You knew.
2 o'clock in the morning.
You knew at that point.
At 18.
You knew you were gay.
Yeah, at 18. And I was absolutely demented. She vomited and had a breakdown. Told me to get out of the house. Apologised 5 minutes later for that because she worshipped me. We then went to see this doctor. He said there's a cure. And he said, leave it with me. So my mother was out of the equation then. I then went to a mental institute, a loony bin, because that's what it was called in those days. It was called Diva, near Chester Zoo. It's now West Cheshire Hospitals with still bars on the windows. But we were further up in Missing Huts. They put me into the mental institute with a false name. Because I was a criminal. So how can I admit that I was homosexual? So I went in, very confused, very upset. Did it for my mum, but in my heart of hearts, I did not believe that it would work. But that wasn't being negative. I was going in with an open mind.
Were you completely on your own then?
Totally. Nobody knew I was there. And that was the biggest fear the whole time I was there. The fear was, will people ever see me again? Will I ever be alive? Will anything ever happen? Because I am worried sick. Anyway, all I remember was trying to sleep in with these people who had problems, somebody pissing on my bed one night, somebody whispering in my ear. I'm an 18-year-old boy. And then I met a girl who was 28 years old, and she was in that mental institute because she had a baby out of wedlock when she was 15 and had no life at all. Anyway, the big day came. I'm really cutting the story down. The doctor or psychiatrist or whatever he was had a tape recorder. Always remember a Grundy TK20 because I had one myself. So reel to reel. He interviewed me for an hour using every graphic word you could think of over sex, so to make it horrible. They then put me in a room. I was in a room with a male nurse. The male nurse was sort of looking after me. They asked me what I drank, and in those days I drank Guinness. And then they gave me dirty books, which was hysterical because it was guys in bathing costumes. What was dirty about the books, I'll never know. So I'm in a bed, in always remember red pajamas, in the bed, reading the books, looking at the pictures, drinking Guinness, listening to the tape. Halfway through the hour, they injected me. And when they injected me, and I used to know what it was called, and I've forgotten because I wiped it out of my mind. Halfway through the hour, they injected me, and I started to feel nausea beyond anything. Couldn't imagine how ill I felt. And I said, I need the bathroom. They said, no, just do it there. So I vomited and
Yeah.
went to the toilet and defecated. Defecated. And I'm lying in my own vomit and shit. That lasted an hour and an hour and an hour and 72 hours without any water, without anything. I was tortured. I then said, I need to leave this now. I need to leave this. To which they were not restraining me, but I was getting the feeling it was going to happen because I wanted out. I thought I'd never be seen alive. They said, all right, then we'll cut it down because they wanted another 2 days. So they said, we'll cut it down, but we'll now put the electrodes on your penis so that if you get an erection looking at the books. I said, I'm lying in my own excrement. I'm lying in my own vomit. I just want to die right now. The last thing I'm going to do is get an erection over anybody. I got out. My mum was away. I got home. I think I bathed for about 8 hours. I scrubbed my skin till it was raw. And that next day I woke up and said, enough is enough. 2 months later, I was in a club called the Rockingham in Manchester. I'm not a violent person, but I tried to kill a guy at the bar who was standing at the bar. I went into a rage beyond anything I've ever experienced. The doorman got me off, and I told him what had happened, and the doctor was in a gay club. So the man who tortured me was gay. So whether he was getting his rocks off watching me being tortured or whether he was experimenting on me for his own means, I will never know. But that was the end of my story.
Christ. Did that take you quite a long time to...
Never got over it. Never. Still have nightmares.
To process.
Still have nightmares. Never spoke about it for years and years and years. And then... a few years ago it was, I'm not very good on dates, but 5 people, 3 girls and 2 guys went to the Court of Human Rights because they were being thrown out of the forces, and they fought it and won, which was great. But one of the guys said, and I've even been offered diversion therapy, and I went, it can't be going on. It cannot be going on. Please tell me it's going on. And I went to see a guy at The Independent, a journalist I knew. He laughed in my face when I told him the story. Then he started digging. Boy, did we dig. And every door was closed. It was exposed. Then the BBC got in touch with me and did a program called Dark Secrets. And we found out other people had had it. Years later, which is an unbelievable thing, a man in Liverpool, a lovely man, came up to me in the street. And he was very gay, very camp, very nice, and said, Peter, I want to apologise on behalf of me and all the nurses, to which just stunned me. It wasn't him that was the nurse with me, but apparently most of the nurses were in who were gay, and they had to be quiet about being gay in case they lost their jobs. But they had to watch me being tortured, and he was one of those nurses. And he wrote me a letter, and I wrote about it in my column in the Echo. He didn't mind, and I got an apology from him. He wasn't my nurse, but can you imagine the guy watching me go through and that, thinking, that could be me? And that's why I get upset, James. You're dealing with mental health, and I've dealt with mental health. That's why I get upset when I hear people saying, oh, I'm not working, I've got mental health issues, and they take the piss. They take the piss because there's a lot of people out there need help, and they're masking that, and that makes me really cross. I went to hell and back and came through it.
It's an incredible story. Wow, I had no idea the violence of it all. I knew loosely that you'd been put into a mental institution, and I didn't know about the pajamas, and I didn't know about the injection, and I didn't know how long you were subjected to that for. And did your mother have any idea what was going on?
My mum, I never told her. If I'd have told her, she'd have committed suicide. Wow. Jonathan Harvey, the fabulous writer, wrote Birdcage about aversion therapy and based it on me. which I didn't know he was doing. And then he'd seen my story on a documentary and wrote about it. And people said, no, it never happened. People did not believe. When we put the story out, people believe it couldn't happen under the NHS. Peter Tatchell got in touch with me years later and said we should sue the NHS. I'm not suing the NHS. I don't want to sue the NHS. They've got enough problems with people suing them. You know, they actually probably think, and it's hard for me to say this, they actually think they were probably right at the time.
What year was this?
Well, I'm 78 now, and I was 18 years old, so 60 years ago. Wow. Roughly 18 to 19 I was. It was a terrible time, but I'm a very clean person, so to be subjected to the filth and everything.
Was it when you got out and you sort of started to, I guess, pick up the pieces of your life and try and, I don't know how you move forward from that in any sort of rational way, but were you able to have relationships? Were you able to be an openly gay man at some point? I mean, I know it was still,
I was openly gay.
It was still very difficult in those times. But were you, on a personal level, were you able to kind of accept who you were and to sort of move forward in a relationship
I was,
basis?
but it held me back over something. I used to fight relationships,
really,
because I was scared. I don't know. I mean, the indoctrination, it's like once a Catholic, always a Catholic. So after that indoctrination in my mind, I still think it's left a few scars, even all these years later. What I did learn was that I'm outrageous, I'm over the top, and I do everything on radio, but I've got a very private life. And I guard my friends who are whatever sexuality, whether they're straight, gay, whatever, trans, whatever. I guard them with my life because they're precious, because they get me through some bad times.
One of the things that I'm quite eager to, I always like speaking to people about. Whenever ultimately I love speaking to interesting people. That's why I wanted to do this show. One of the questions that often comes up is a sense of pride in oneself and a sense of peacefulness, and I think fundamentally what I'm asking you is, do you like who you are? You like being Pete Price?
Yeah, I like being Pete Price, but I've got a private side to myself, and I love my own company. I love the fact that I love my own company. So I think it's sad if you can't love your own company. A lot of people I know just can't be on their own.
So many people just can't be on their own. I've had this conversation before.
I love it. I just love doing what I'm doing. And I love walking. I'm scared of getting old. Don't like it.
You look remarkably well.
Yeah, but that's what frightens me. Is it going to go very quick? I do a lovely gag about getting old, which is, I'll do it. It's the two guys that meet once said, "How are you?" He went, "Well, how are you? You look great. I've been away. Where have you been? Where have you been?" He went, hang on. Where have you been? He went, hang on. Sun, sand, grows in a plant pot, sticks to a wall. His mate went, "Ivy." He went, "That's right. Ivy, where have we been?"
That's a look into your future, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh no, got to mention now. God bless us. I'm terrible on scripts.
Are you?
No, because I asked you recently as mate to mate about how you get on with scripts. I am terrible. I work with Leanne Campbell all the time in panto, from a little girl to where she is now, and I always go, and she knows, and she'll say, "Daddy, would you like to take me to the shop?" When you
look at another actor on stage with that look that says, "I haven't got a clue where I am."
I know. I always remember the one with Cilla Black. I was with Cilla Black in 2008. Best pantomime I ever did. That was the panto where she was on stage. She had a baddie, and she went, "How shall I kill him?" And somebody went, "Fucking sing to him," which was the greatest ever panto ad-lib. And she walked off stage and everybody thought she was upset. She wasn't. She had a little accident down below. She had a little wee. So anyway, I walked back on stage and you can imagine I couldn't think what to do. And I looked at Cilla and Cilla looked at me and went, "Don't ask me."
Those are the moments that people go to pantomime for. That's what we want. We want to see people cock up. We want to see the actors not have a clue where they are. I love it. You've just going back to Liverpool. As I said at the top of the show, you've made huge waves in Liverpool. You're really well known. You can't walk down the street without people shouting at you.
Yeah, Liz.
Yeah, I know. I've got to bring it up because what I think's fascinating about your career is that it does span generations. So people of your age, of my parents' age, for example, will know you from the comedy clubs and the variety performances and all that kind of stuff. But it's filtered all the way down to now you've got people in their early 20s, 20 years of age even.
10 years old, 15 years old.
You get 15-year-olds.
All the time. On the podcasts, on social media. You lizard. It's terrible.
What I was going to say was... It's amazing, honestly. The way that you embrace... So are you going to have to explain for
it's dead simple. It's seriously dead simple.
Why do they call you a lizard?
Dead simple. A PR company would kill to have written this. I had a call on a young lad, sounded about 11, 12, something like that. And he said, why won't you have David Icke on your show? For those people who don't know who David Icke is, do you know who David Icke is?
I know the name.
Right. Well, you'll love this story. Very, very, very brief. David Icke was one of the best sports commentators in the business ever. And he was at the height of his career. Good-looking lad. And he said one day, I'm the son of God. And he meant it. He actually meant it. And he said it on Terry Wogan's show at Tea Time. The press destroyed him. He is now, many, many years later, one of the biggest conspiracy theorists in the world and can fill Wembley Stadium at 50 quid a ticket. So he ain't stupid, but he went to hell and back. So David Icke said that the royal family and the Rothschilds, who are the bankers, supposedly, are shape-shifting lizards. That's what he said. So this boy came on and said, why won't you have David Icke on your show? And I said, he won't come on right now. No, David, but he wouldn't come on right now because of all the stick he was getting. And this boy said, you won't have him on because you're a shape-shifting lizard. That was all it was said. 3 minutes. A 3-minute call. 3-minute call. Nothing else. That was it. His brother thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. And his brother was a WW wrestling fanatic and goes to America, wherever, to have this. He couldn't get over that I was a lizard. So he got a yellow piece of paper, which, by the way, you can all see this and see the whole story on Safari or whatever you go on. And he got this thing, and he got Hulk Hogan to hold Pete Price is a lizard. Hulk Hogan's never heard of me. The hell's Pete Price? And that got 2 million hits. Then Paul McCartney thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever... He put one up. Then somebody in Australia put one up. And all these years later, they've just made a documentary on me about being a lizard. The Lizard of Liverpool.
But
nothing.
What I really loved,
stupid call.
What I really, really loved was there was a period of time where I remember opening like the local Echo newspaper in Liverpool, and I'd see a picture of you on stage dressed as a lizard.
Well, I thought I might as well embrace it.
Honestly, the best thing you could have done. The best thing you could have done.
But you've got to embrace it.
You have.
If you don't embrace it, I always remember Bo Selector and Craig.
David.
His career was destroyed because he didn't accept.
Because he didn't have a sense of humour with it.
Yeah.
If you're going to put yourself out in the public domain, if you're going to be on social media, if you're going to be on the airwaves, you're going to get criticised and people are going to take the piss out of you. It goes with the territory. You either own it or you fight against it and potentially lose. But if you own it as you have, all of a sudden you're reinvented in popular pop culture in the younger generations.
There was one before that. You do know?
No.
Oh my word! You don't know?
Well.
Oh, this is a dreadful one.
Come on.
Are you an LFC fan? And you don't know the story?
No.
Right.
What have you done to Liverpool Football Club?
You remember that phenomenal game in Istanbul?
I've heard of it.
Yep. With Steven Gerrard when we won. It was phenomenal.
Came back from 3-0 down. Yeah.
Unbelievable game of football. I didn't go because I was working. I couldn't go. Wanted to see it, and I am an LFC fan. Not as mad as you, but I'm a fan. I got a phone call from Australia. Have you got the television on? No. Put it on. No, I don't want to watch the game. I was worried about it. I got a phone call from New York. Have you got the game on? No. I got a phone call from Paris. Have you got the game on? No. My phone was going absolutely mental. Once again, it's all out there for you to see. You're going to die. I honestly thought you knew this story. I then go on the telly, and there is the commentator, and behind him is a double-size bedsheet with, in huge letters, Pete Price is a It's all out there to see.
I can't believe I've never seen that.
And they move the commentator because they've only got one camera. But they're moving the poster behind.
They're passing it along the crowd.
All along. The press picked up on it. The Echo picked up on it. Of course, they didn't use the word. Not the nicest word in the world. Thank God my mother wasn't alive. Long story short, again, I found the guys that did it. They lived in Huyton. They did a book on posters. And I got them on my show. Sadly, one of them had passed away of cancer not so long ago. But I got them on my show. And I said, why me, guys? Pricey, we're doing the poster. We do a poster every year, you know, and we're in this pub at night, you know. And we said to everyone, who's the biggest in Liverpool? And everyone said you. The next year, the poster was up again. Pete Price is still a
If there's one thing, right, that I love about our football club, it is the sense of humour. Some of the flags have been unbelievable. There's one about where was it? It was in Turkey. It said. So that was it. There was a stadium that we went to in Turkey. It might have been like Besiktas or somewhere. It's no. And it said, "Welcome to hell, my arse. You should see the Grafton on a Friday night."
Right. Yeah, that sums them up. The end of the story was they wrote One Night in Istanbul. I think it was Nicky Holt.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Which was on the Empire. And he asked, could he use the flags? I'm not going to say no. I mean, I didn't want it. But once again, I embraced it. So what the sketch was there was a commentator from Sky, and he goes to the guy, and the guy's got the banner wrapped round him, but you don't know it, and said, do you want to speak about the game? I'm not on the toll. What are you filming me for? Blah, 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 blah. Can you tell me, Graham, what I think of her? Pete Price is a And then the girl's got it wrapped around her waist, and she went, oh yeah, I'm going to say hello to me friend. Pete Price is still a to which the compere says, who's this Pete Price? So that's it. On the day they're filming it, and the team are in, and Rafa's in, they're all in, everyone's in. Nobody knew, no one except the writer, that I was hiding in the wings. So when he goes, who's Pete Price? I walked on stage and goes, you're the not me, and walked off. Simple as that. Which they've got recorded. They were going to use it in the film, but they never used it because of the X-rated, and they would have lost an audience. And so that was before Lizard.
Wow.
So to answer your question, you've got to embrace it.
Honestly, but it's the ownership. I think that's the reason why you've been so successful, is having a sense of humour. Look, you know, everything that you've been through in your life, so many difficult things that would have ordinarily, would have killed a lot of men. You know, you've bounced back from all of those. You're still successful. You're still recording. You're still popular. You're still making people laugh, which I think is one of your greatest assets, is that you're a very, very funny man. You do all of that with a smile and can laugh at yourself. That in itself is an incredible career by anyone's standards, Pete.
But to be a comic, you've got to laugh at yourself. If you take yourself serious, I think you're finished.
Yeah.
I think you're wiped out. It's a difficult one.
Pete Price, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, all the luck in the world with your new podcast, and I'd like to be asked to back maybe a year's time.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Thanks very much.
You lizard.
You couldn't write that end, could you?